catch the ball. He may have the best hands on of all the running backs.
Right.
Cataboo. So it's just going to be very interesting. It's a fun room. I'm actually really excited. I hope they've got the run blocking because I think this is a really good running back room.
Well, welcome back to another edition of Inside BBI with John and Eric. I'm John McDevitt, and with me, as always, senior editor of Big Blue Interactive, Mr. Eric Kennedy. First off, hey, happy Memorial Day! It's been a nice holiday weekend. I don't know about for yourself. For me, I'd say it was relaxing, but I did a shit ton of outside yard work today, and overall, it's been project after project. We got graduations coming up this week, so been busy. How about yourself, Eric?
I did the yard work yesterday, so today's been kind of quiet. We had a tire car with a hole in the tire, nail in the tire, so we had to get that patched. So not fun, but it's Memorial Day. So love it.
So let's see. I'll start with what do you have? What are you drinking first? I'll let you go first.
I am drinking. What is this? A Blue Ridge Lager. So it's got a bird on it. So.
Nice, a bird on it. So I'm going with Sandy Cheeks West Coast IPA. My wife found it, so it's got the So there you go. She found it. It's not bad. She thought it was funny just from the Sandy Cheeks part. So I was like, sure, why not? Let's go for it.
Speaking of beer, do you want to promo our Wednesday show?
I do. I'm glad. Thank you for that. So Wednesday will be very interesting. We're gonna call it Pour Four. There's gonna be 4 topics that we're gonna do. We're gonna pour a beer. Now, just to be clear, because someone thought we were drinking, doesn't mean we are drinking 4 individual beers.
It does.
It could be. It might happen, but we're going to pour out each one. So 4 subjects. The folks from New York Rush, Sean and Chris are coming on. They'll be joining us. So we're going to do 4 topics. Eric and I picked 2 topics. We had New York Rush pick the other 2 topics. I have all 4 topics, and only I know which order they will be done in. So when we start the show, I will pick the topic as we go. Chat will be open, and somebody asked me a question the other day, and Eric even mentioned it when I brought it up about what happened. So when the last live show we did, we had super chats, and if you don't know what a super chat is for Yahoo or for YouTube, the second you become monetized, it gives you options and things, and I just turned everything on, and we don't pick anything. It's just YouTube lets it be whatever it is. And so what that means is you can actually.
It felt like we were being.
Yeah, it's not so.
Club.
Yeah, so it's like, so to be specific, we had a couple people that they basically donated or paid to have their chat. It's called the super chat. That's open now for every chat every time. So again, we're not pushing you to do anything. However, what I will say is for Wednesday's show, because of the amount of topics that we're going to be covering, and we do want to try to keep it a tight time frame, because we're going to do about an hour and 20. So that's really going to give us roughly about 20 minutes per topic. So in order to do that, if there are super chats, I will bring those up. We will take, if you have questions, we will include those. I will try to do other ones, but I can't guarantee that I'll get to those just because we do have other folks on. It's really cool that we get a chance to talk with them. We want to go over these subjects, so we will do that. So if you see that, if that's there, that's what it's for. Hey, feel free if you want to, but we're not telling you or making you do anything. But anyway,
it's going to be a lot of drinking of beer on that show. It sounds
there will be on Wednesday's show. I do actually want to tip off one other thing, because it's all done except for the date. So that's the only thing that's going to, so I can't give you the date. But Eric already knows because I already shared it with him. We will be doing the next season preview, and folks, feel free to, if you want to super chat your requests for those things, feel free, because we do have to decide down the road what we're going to do. But the next one is going to be on the year 2000. And the reason that's pretty cool is because we are going to have offensive lineman Glenn Parker is going to join us for that 2000 review. So we'll have somebody who was on that team. We're going to be able to bring him on. I don't know if we'll keep him for the entire show, but we will certainly ask him a number of questions and stuff. So that's going to be pretty cool. Larry will be back. Matt will be back. And Glenn Parker, who was on the offensive line of that team that went to the Super Bowl, will be joining us.
That'd be really cool. And we do have a clip previewing Wednesday's show.
The beer's over there in that box.
Wouldn't it be great if you were devil fishing and they had beer? Really watery American beer.
Up the Shark's house.
You know, after this beer, we should have a beer sometime.
I don't know if you ever saw Devilfish. Did you ever see
I have
Devilfish?
seen Devilfish. I have
Okay.
seen Devilfish.
So you know the
yes.
running beer jokes in that movie. So with when MS2K does it, yeah, right. I
Oh my
assume you've
God.
seen, yeah, okay.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, you're in my wheelhouse on that stuff.
All right.
So anyway, so that's coming up, and we're working on some other stuff, some really cool guests. Until they're locked in, I won't. I'll just
Yeah,
say
don't
that I
spoil
think,
that in case it doesn't
yeah,
work out.
in case it
So,
doesn't fall through, but or if it falls through. But I will say, if we do get a couple of them, even just a couple. I think a number of folks here are going to be very surprised and very, very happy. Non-traditional giant guests, but definitely football related, not off
right,
topic stuff. So
right.
anyway, that being said, Eric, we said we were going to do a preview of the 2025 Giants positional group of tight ends, and I'll let you kind of start it off. Maybe let's recap a little bit of what we had last year, and then kind of lead into this season.
Yeah, this is a group that's going to be filled with potential. So I think there are two groups of fans when they look at the roster. They're the glass half full and the glass half empty people. And the glass half empty people are going to say, this tight end room stinks. They haven't done anything. You guys are overrating it. I don't know what your views are going to be. And the glass half full people are going to be like, hey, there's a lot of talent now potentially in this room. I'm really excited about this unit. So we got to try to find a happy medium, I think, in between these. But I think it's a very interesting room. So last year, Theo Johnson gets drafted. Of course, we had Bellinger already on the roster from 2022, who had a promising first part of his year. Then he had the eye injury. Never really seemed to sort of regain his rookie magic, if you want to call it that. But Bellinger was in the room, and he was really pretty much relegated to third string tight end because Chris Manhertz was signed, and he became the blocking tight end. So our room really was Theo Johnson, Chris Manhertz, and Bellinger. And then late in the season, we picked up Greg Dulcich from Denver, who never really played that much. And we'll talk about him. He's another interesting guy. So the problem with last year was Theo's a big dude, and we'll get into him specifically in a second. And he's got a lot of talent, but like a lot of rookies, especially rookie tight ends, he had his hiccups early in the year. Drop passes, blocking wasn't great. But as the year progressed, he got better and better in both areas. And he had some really cool highlight plays. And then Cy kept talking about how his blocking was getting better. Ironically, maybe perhaps his best game was the game he got hurt in, was against Dallas, where his blocking was good. He had 5 catches. I think he had 5 catches in that game. Had some really tough runs after the catch, and he gets a Liz Frank injury, and we don't see him again. So then Bellinger comes off the bench, and Bellinger plays pretty much the rest of the way as the number 1 tight end, with Manhertz still playing the number 2 guy. And Bellinger actually looked pretty decent blocking, which was an improvement for him, but didn't really the ball wasn't really thrown that much to him. So it really wasn't a great year for the Giants tight ends, but there was the promise of Theo Johnson. At least that's my recollection of the year. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty solid coverage of what it was. I mean, I think, again, not to drag the carcass into the conversation, but quarterback play didn't help. Right. It just did not help the tight ends at all. Johnson did drop some early. That can't be blamed on the quarterback per se on some of those. Those are just blatant drops. And you can see that I think I think his physical piece was a step ahead of the mental part of the game. So I think maybe, just trying to overthink what he had to do and just, because it just wasn't a natural thing. Later, you saw some very natural catches from him, difficult ones too. One over the middle where he's just reaching up and snagging the ball. I still think the quarterback play, though, really did hamper this group. The one big thing too, though, leading not just last year but even before, is really Bellinger's the guy that is sort of the enigma or the big question mark. Like, what happened from early in his rookie year? The eye injury is one thing, but he did come back. He played pretty well in the rest of the season once his eye was healed, and then in the playoff game he played pretty well against Minnesota. since that time, he's been really a non-factor, and that's been very surprising.
And his play, his snaps have gone down. His effectiveness has gone down. And again, I thought he showed some flashes late in the year last year. So he didn't really play that much until December. And then when he did come back, at least he was blocking at a higher level than he was blocking before. But he's going to, I think he's, when we get specifically to him, let's start with Theo. But when we get to him, I think you and I are on the same page that's not given that Daniel Bellinger is going to even make this team. So we'll have to see. Much depends on how many tight ends they keep. And it'll probably keep 3 or 4, and it depends on how many they keep and what happens here. But Theo, let's start off with Theo because he's a lot more talented than I think a lot of Giants fans realize. It's a matter of can he put it all together, and we've seen the ability of him to do it. There was that really cool 35-yard touchdown pass against the Commanders, right down the seam. It was a bad throw by Daniel Jones too. Theo basically had to sort of twist around to catch that, and you saw that huge catch radius he has. So if you run into Theo in person, if you see him in person, he's a big dude. He is a big guy.
Right.
And on top of that, he's bigger than he looks. And on top of that, he's got a huge wingspan. So he can snatch the ball. And he has good hands. I was trying to explain this earlier in the last week on the site that you can have natural hands, but have focus drops. So it doesn't mean you have bad hands. It means you get a little sloppy with it. So I don't think he's got bad hands. I think he had early on, it's one of these deals. He's a rookie. He's nervous. He's trying to run after before he secures the ball, that type of thing. But you saw some of those his ability to snatch the ball, to grab the ball. And I think he has that. And his blocking improved as the year went along too. What's interesting is when you hear people like the Giants PR guys talking about him on Big Blue Kickoff Live, and remember they're talking to coaches behind the scenes and stuff like that. They say that the coaching staff is really high on Theo Johnson, and I believe that. I think they see a ball of clay here that they can mold into a legitimate receiving threat. He can catch, he can run, he can get down the seam. There's similarities between him and the draft pick Fidone that we'll talk about. Again, the catch radius, his ability to run down the field and threaten the defense vertically, but he's got that. So the good news too on him is in the old days, and this, when you get the dreaded Liz Frank injury, usually you didn't know if a player could come back from that really well.
Right.
I don't know what they've done with medical science with the Liz Frank, but it seems like players are coming back from the Liz Frank injuries pretty quickly today, knock on wood. But Theo, I believe, is already back on the practice field. He had this injury at the end of November, beginning of December. If this was like 1990, I think you and I would be like, we're not even sure if he's going to be available at the beginning of the year, but he's already on the practice field. So again, I whatever medical advances they've done with Liz Frank injuries, it seems to be, and Andrew Thomas is in that same category. So again, knock on wood, it looks like the Liz Frank issue is not going to be a big deal for him.
Yeah, it's going back to the beginning part of what you were saying. I think when we see Daboll do the breakdown, and by the way, I cannot wait until we get to the quarterback piece. Just there's a lot of stuff recently that I'm looking forward to. But when you see Daboll have the quarterbacks do breakdown plays right on the board, a lot of what you hear is how complicated the Giants offense, how Daboll's offense is. There's a lot of pieces to it. There's a lot of different calls. There's different variations. There's a lot. And as a rookie coming in and a guy who played in a very simplistic offense at Penn State, that's a lot to be processing. And I think that's the part where you were talking about, he's got natural snatching hands, but I think his brain was slightly behind his body, trying to remember, what am I doing on this play? I have to get over here. I'm way on the other side of the field.
All right.
I'm supposed to come across here. Wait, what? Am I blocking and releasing? Am I blocking, holding, going in, blocking, holding, going out? There was you could just tell everything was like very mechanical with what he was doing early on, and that's where the drops came from.
Right.
He's a big dude. You mentioned that. And the funny thing is, you mentioned two things. They sound like they go against each other. He's even bigger than he looks
Yes.
because he's a tall dude. He's a
Yes.
muscular dude, but he carries that weight. It's extremely
Yes.
well distributed.
Yes.
So he kind of looks thinner than he really is
Mhm.
while being a big guy.
Right.
So I think he can be a force, a little bit more of a force in the blocking game, even more than Bellinger can. I don't know the Giants are going to try to exploit that much. I think, but that will keep him being the guy if he's going to be the guy, because he's the real true two-way player that we have at tight end right now. Bellinger's close, but this guy's got all he's I don't want to dig too far back into the Bavaro pieces, but he has Bavaro's size to a degree. He's tall. A little taller than Bavaro, maybe not as muscular as Bavaro, but
Right.
he's got that ability to do some blocking, and he's got that ability to make plays down the field in the
Down the
passing
field.
game. And
Right.
Bellinger's not really the down the field guy.
Oh yeah, and so defenses don't really worry about Bellinger going vertical on them, but they're going to
Right.
have to pay attention to Theo Johnson. And I want to throw this out there too. I do think fans sometimes kind of conflate or confuse wide receivers and tight ends in this sense that I've noticed a lot of times when Giants fans look at highlights of tight ends, they say, well, geez, that guy isn't very fast or very fluid. It's a different position. So if you
Right.
look at the best tight ends in the NFL, they're not particularly nifty people. Even the Kelseys of the world. Again, they're not going to run 4.4s or 4.5s by you. But for a big guy, for a guy who is as big as he is, and Fidone, when we talk about him, because I saw people commenting that Fidone didn't look particularly fast on film. For a big tight end, he does. And same thing with Theo Johnson. So I think the best way to describe what you were just describing is that the game slowed down a little bit for Theo as the year progressed. So and that's not unusual for tight ends. Sai has talked about that tight ends is one of the hardest transitions from college to pro, because it isn't just catching, it's blocking, it's both. And it takes tight ends usually time to develop. Not always, but usually it does. And it really happens for all positions too. You can't just come into the league usually and it all just clicks for you. So the good news is Theo did show the ability to do the things that we hope he can do. It's just whether he can do it more consistently or not. What I do like, and I don't want to overemphasize it again, is when I hear people like John Schmelk bring him up, he always mentions, oh, the coaching staff really likes this guy, and they really. So that's the kind of scuttlebutt that you'd like to hear. Now, the other interesting guy they're bringing back before we move on to Bellinger, and if I can add him to the stage, is Chris Manhertz, who. This is one of the three catches he had last year, a touchdown, which was a cool catch. It was actually it wasn't an easy catch. And Manhertz is a guy that's bounced around the league, but wherever he's gone, teams that have had him have enjoyed his ability to block people. So he's the blocker on the team. He was a free agent. The Giants said, we want to bring him back, and they brought him back. So they have a role in mind for him to be the blocking tight end when they do the 12 personnel. So I think there's a pretty darn decent good chance that he's going to be back on the roster this year as the blocking guy, unless somebody else like a Bellinger or a Fidone show really top-notch blocking skills in this upcoming training camp. So I think Manhertz is a guy is one of those guys that a lot of fans don't think much about, but I guarantee you the coaching staff does. They want a guy that's able to block the edge, and so I wouldn't be surprised if he's back. But he's not a threat in the passing game.
Well, I mean, and he's got connections to Daboll. Like it goes back to Buffalo. So he has an inside track. They have him for a reason, a very specific reason why they want him there. I didn't see it last year, to be quite honest. I thought his blocking was average at best for a guy that's really why he's on the team. So I think those other guys have an opportunity, but clearly you're going to have to shine because he does have a connection to the staff and there's a comfort level there. I mean, even towards the end of his career, Howard Cross really provided almost nothing other than blocking the last
Mhm.
2 to 3 years he was on the team. But you knew what you were getting with him blocking wise. You knew that you could put him out there and he would handle that piece of it. Plus, he brought that veteran leadership. We are a young team, and Manhurst does have 10 years in the league. So
Right.
there is something to be said about that as well. But I'm with you. Some of this is all dependent upon what happens with some of these other guys in camp.
Right. And I'm looking at his snap counts now on offense, and it averaged around 30%. So he was basically on the field 30% of the time. There were games where it was close to 50%, and there were games where there was one game here that he was only on the field 13% of the snaps. So it varies, and depending on who the opponent is and so forth. So much, I think, depends too, is, and we don't know this, we've kind of talked about this in the last show when we did running backs, is how much are the Giants going to run the football? If they become a more running oriented team, and we don't know if they will or not, then it makes sense to have a guy like Manhurts more on the roster, to have a guy that can run block. So we'll see what kind of team they're going to be. The guy I think is more at risk here, and I know you've talked about it before, is Daniel Bellinger. So I think Bellinger's at a crossroads here. I still would not discount him from still being the type of guy that we hoped he would be, but I could also see him being cut. I think he's at a crossroads here, and he's going to have a very strong camp, because I think there are a couple tight ends on this roster that might be breathing down his neck. Somebody in the forum did ask us for you and I to specifically talk about what has happened to him. Why is he not the same player he was his rookie year? Maybe he wasn't as good as we thought he was. I don't think it's really the eye injury that's really impacting him. That was a serious thing. It was an orbital fracture, wasn't it? I think he broke.
Yeah, and it's kind of popped out.
Right. And it was really, it was really scary injury. I don't think that's there. Now, when he came out of college, the irony was he had a reputation of being more of a blocker and
Right.
an athletic guy, but his college didn't really use him in that. And then his rookie year, while he was sort of flashing as a receiver, and remember he had that really cool end around on the goal line for a touchdown. Yes. So he ran a touchdown, and he looked like a better athlete and offensive player than a blocker his rookie year. And we all had high expectations for him, and remember the Darren Waller experiment going into the following year, and that tight end room imploded because Darren Waller got hurt again, and Bellinger just had a terrible season based on the expectation level for him his second year. And then coming into last year, he really became the third string tight end. So like I said, he played a lot towards the end because of the injury to Theo Johnson, and it's a big camp for him. I'm very curious to see how this goes for him. He's a hard worker. We've all seen him. He worked, remember the famous picture of him in training camp, how bulked up he was in terms of, his arms. So he works his tail off, but we'll have to see.
He started his rookie year with 30 receptions, just for 268.
Right.
That went to 25 in 23, down to 14 last year. He scored 2 touchdowns his rookie year, none since.
Right.
You're
and
right.
Look at his snap counts. And look at his snap counts how they've went down last year too. There were games where he barely played.
Yeah, it's something clearly changed with the Giants. So in his rookie year, he was targeted 35 times for 30 receptions, 28 times for 25 receptions, 17 times for 14 receptions. Now, again, quarterback play does play a role in some of this. But what doesn't make sense is just the fact that he's gone from 30 to 14. So when you look at it, when we talk about who's in kind of a precarious position, I don't look at Bellinger necessarily competing with some of those rookie guys that we're talking about, whether whether we're looking at Fidone, whether we're looking at I think Terry, we'll probably talk about him, or whether you look
Right.
at even if you count Dulcich in that group,
Right.
because literally what's going to happen is those guys are going to compete for a job. And if they are going there, then it's really going to be the Giants are going to decide which one of the veterans are we keeping. Are we keeping Manhertz? Are we keeping Bellinger? Manhertz again fits something that the Giants don't have with most of the other guys on the team. He is supposed to be a full-on blocker. That's the guy that they can count on. If they need to just line a guy up next to the tackle and leave him in to block all the time, Manhertz is going to be that guy. Bellinger won't be that guy. So if any of those rookies come through, the Giants are going to ultimately decide between, I think, the two veterans. I think it's going to be Manhertz and Bellinger, kind of which veteran is staying if they keep the rookies. Now, if those rookies don't really develop or they think they're a little ways away, then I think Bellinger and Manhertz both make the team. But if you see any of those other guys kind of shining, and we'll get to Dulcich in a minute, there's a reason why he might have somewhat of an inside track here too that we don't want to discount. I think Bellinger would be the odd man out if they keep between the two veterans. His salary is increasing as we move along based on the rookie contracts and how they go. Manhertz has a very defined role that Bellinger does not have. So if it comes down to it, I think Bellinger could be the man out. And keep in mind, we juggled contracts and it doesn't mean that we're in a bad position overall salary cap wise. For the year, we had to juggle some contracts, and I think they're probably still going to have to do at least one more. And then there might be some cuts as we go through camp. And when you decide, sometimes it's going to be who counts more against the cap is going to be the guy that gets cut.
If I'm Bellinger, I am focusing big time on my blocking right now because I kind of agree with you. I agree with you, and I don't agree with you. I agree with you in the sense that I think the only sure bet is Theo, as long as he stays healthy. And I think everyone else is competing for a spot here, and it could go any number of ways depending on how all of the rest of these other guys perform. However, I don't see Bellinger's skill set competing directly athletically with some of the other guys. I would try, if I was Daniel, I would try to replace Manhertz's role on this team as the blocker, because then you get somebody, if he can cut anywhere near the blocking level, he's a better receiving threat than Manhertz. And at that point, the coaching staff may say, you know what? Bellinger gives us enough of the blocking and better receiving, and he's a younger guy and still has a bit of an upside. Manhertz is sort of towards the end. I want to go with the younger guy. That would be my mindset if I'm Bellinger in this case. I would be like, my camp is going to be, not that he ignore the receiving, but it's going to be my role on this team. I want to become the new blocking tight end on this team. That's how I would approach it if I were him.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair assessment. I'm also curious. The first team guys are going to get a lot of first team play with the vet quarterbacks. The second and third team guys may get a lot of play with our rookie quarterback. And if you develop kind of a bit of a connection with him, that could be beneficial to you. If the coaches feel like you really work well with this guy. So just because you're not getting a lot of first team reps doesn't mean that you might not really have a solid position. If you can show something with the guy that everybody on the Giant staff is going to be keeping an eye on, is going to be that quarterback, that young quarterback dropping back, looking around. And if he develops a connection with some of these tight ends, that's a way to go. I think blocking for Bellinger is paramount. I think you're full on right on that one. I think that's a big deal.
Okay. And that brings us to, I want to address some of the comments that we're seeing too in chat before we get off here, because there's some really good points here. Dulcich, who I don't think people are talking enough about. So there's a little bit of a fear factor here based on recent history because of the Darren Waller experience. Darren Waller, as everybody remembers, came to the New York Giants with chronic hamstring issues. And he was an older dude at the end of his career, but somebody who had two or three, I think three, but at least two incredible seasons. Just amazing seasons, 1,000-yard seasons, kind of guy that could take over a game, and the Giants gambled on that and lost when they traded for him. It was a third round pick for him, right?
Yes.
I think we traded it,
yes.
which is not insignificant. As we found out, we got Darius Alexander for a third round pick. So Dulcich was drafted in the same draft as Bellinger. He was taken a round earlier than Bellinger. On size draft preview, Dulcich was his third ranked tight end in that draft. Bellinger was his seventh ranked tight end. Size was a big fan of Dulcich coming out of college as a receiving type tight end. And you can see on the limited highlights that he put together in Denver why Cy was high on him. This guy is another guy that can get down the field and make plays in the passing game. And I think I hope I'm not stealing your thunder here. He was catching passes from who when he was in Denver? Russell Wilson. And a lot of his highlights are from Russell Wilson. And that there's two things that caught my eye with that. Number one, the talent level of the tight end, and we'll get into that in a second. But number two, it was evidence that Russell Wilson can throw over the middle
right.
and use the tight end because he was throwing to Dulcich. And Dulcich is an athletic guy. If he's got the hamstring issues behind him, again, and he's a younger guy than Waller, so let's keep a positive thought on this. But if he's got that behind him, this could be a really big pickup for the Giants. He's very young still. He's got a lot of talent, and he's a legitimate threat in the passing game. And so he's one of those guys that I think he could even theoretically become the number 2 tight end on this team. He's that talented. We're all to get excited about Fidone, and we'll talk about him. But right now, he's the veteran, and he's also an athlete who can get down the field. This is a guy that I think has a legitimate shot of not only making the team, but also being a big factor on the team moving forward. We'll have to see. If you get a chance, go and look at his highlights as a receiver on YouTube. There's a 3 or 4 minute clip on him catching, and then half the passes are from Russell Wilson. So that was interesting.
Well, I'll agree and disagree. Yes. I agree with all the statements about what he can be.
Right.
The problem is his rookie year, 33 receptions, 411 yards, 2 touchdowns. Since that time, he's had, I believe, if I'm doing my math correctly, 13 receptions since then.
Hamstring issues.
He's fallen off a cliff. He's now moved on. He's with the Giants. Didn't do anything last year offensively with them. So
and they cut him and they got rid of him.
It is a gamble. It is a gamble to say that he could now. He physically has the talent.
Right.
Health wise is a question.
Right.
But also there comes a point though where all the breaks have to go your way.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to, he does have that one thing that you mentioned. I was thinking he has the connection with Russell Wilson, but let's not overstate the connection.
Right.
They didn't play together for very long. It was one season. So, but as far as the guys with the Giants, he has more experience with Russell Wilson than anybody else. So that does bode well. But when you draft a player, which the Giants did, when you have a guy you already drafted on the team, which we just covered in Bellinger, and then you've got another draft who's basically your number 1 tight end right now.
Right.
A guy coming in from the outside hasn't really done anything in the last 4 years. That's a risky one. That's a bit of a stretch to say. Now, if again, some of the guys we're about to talk about, if they don't develop as quickly as would be necessary to be part of this, I think Dulcich A has the experience, B the knowledge of the quarterback, and he has the knowledge of the Giant system. He was with the team, and he's had longer time with the playbook. So there is that. But it's really going to come down. I think for Dulcich, it's really going to come down to other players. I think if he plays the way he plays, that gives him a shot. But it really depends on what the other players do.
Well, we'll see. So let's take example. They're both of their rookie years. So both of them got hurt their rookie years. Bellinger with the eye injury, Dulcich with a hamstring injury, and Bellinger played in 12 games and had 30 catches for 268 yards. So 30 catches, 268. They both had 2 touchdowns, but let's focus. So 30 catches, 268 yards. Dulcich
played 10 games. He
played
played
10 games, and he had 400. Where is it?
411 yards.
411 yards
Now,
on 33 catches. So
but
what
I will
my
say,
point is,
I'll say this though, right? On the 33
right,
catches, he was targeted 55 times. So there
right.
are 22 either poor passes or drops or defended whatever. He was targeted 55 times and caught 33 of them.
Right, but he's not a kind of guy that drops a lot of passes. I'd have to check what his drop rate was. But the issue, the point I'm trying to make here is he was a greater focal point as a rookie in Denver's offense than Bellinger was. So my point is and he was more productive in the basically the same number of games. So what I'm saying is, if Bellinger, we're saying Bellinger is still got the ability to do more than what he has done to date, so does Dulcich. That's my point. And Dulcich was the earlier draft pick. We'll see. I think he has an ability to surprise people in camp. He could get cut. But I think he's in the mix. I do think he's in the mix. He's not an older veteran that's been around a long time. He still has promise, and he knows that this is probably it for him. If he gets cut by the Giants, he may not even end up on another team someplace, but we'll see. I'm just saying, keep an eye on him because he's got the talent, and he has flashed in this league as a rookie. And like you said, he sort of faded, like Bellinger. He sort of faded the last 2 years. So we'll see what happens with him. Now, the guy that everyone's excited about is, where is he here? Is Thomas Fidone. So our 7th round draft pick, who some projected to go as high as the 5th round. I saw somebody mentioned that if he had never had the knee injuries, he probably would have gone even higher than that, maybe 3rd or 4th round. So those who don't know, Fidone was the highest recruited tight end of his class when he came out, ahead of Bowers, right? Brock Bowers. I think he was ahead of Brock Bowers.
I believe so.
Yeah. So he was heavily recruited. He was the heaviest recruited player to go to Nebraska in years. And he suffered 2 ACL injuries back to back. And he missed his first 2 seasons because of those injuries. And then he played the last 2 seasons with those injuries. And wasn't bad, but I saw a commentary from a Nebraska, or the Nebraska version of Inside BBI. Let's put it that, where 2 guys who were sitting around discussing Nebraska football, and they were talking about the fact that a lot of Nebraska fans are kind of pissed off at Thomas, and the reason is they felt a little bit cheated. And this is going to sound a little sick, but cheated by the injuries. In other words, they saw that Thomas, leading up to the draft, was one of those guys that a lot of teams were sniffing around and thought he might go again in the 5th round. And they were like, well, why didn't he do more at Nebraska? And there were people in their version of chat who were like, overrated, don't like him. And there were other people who were saying the quarterback play wasn't good. He had those injuries. He was the best player on offense for them when they used him in the passing game, that type of thing. So it was a funny discussion, because you see that a lot in free agency. When a player goes to another team, the fan base will say, we didn't want the guy anyway. I'm glad he's gone. But Thomas is another big guy. I don't think he's as muscular in terms of, I shouldn't say muscular. I don't think he's got the same body type as Theo Johnson in terms of his width, but he's another tall, linear guy with a really, really long arms. I think he's got 34-inch arms, really big catch radius, runs very well even after the ACLs, did very well in the testing. That was another thing that ticked the people off in the Nebraska show. They were like, well, he tested so good. How come we didn't use him more? That type of thing. So, but he runs well. And then at the mini camp, the Giants employees that were there, again, on Big Blue Kickoff Live, were talking about, and I think it was Matt Sytak who said this, said he moved like a wide receiver. He said, again, he said he looked very fluid and he looked very natural out there running patterns and catching the ball. And you see that on tape with him at times. There were some plays in the highlight tape with him, like the Theo Johnson play where Daniel Jones threw a terrible pass and Theo had to reach behind him. And there's a pass that Fidone caught down the field where same thing, he had to reach way behind him, and those long arms of his came into play, and then he he ran up field and had big yards after the catch. So I think there's a chance that Fidone could also be the number 2 tight end on this team. It depends on how fast he develops. The other thing he's got going for him is his college coaching staff. Matt Rule and his tight end coach were pro coaches. So in the system that they were teaching at Nebraska was a pro system. And there was a recent interview on Giants.com with the tight end coach, and he said Thomas will have no issues at all picking up a pro offense because he said that's what we were running here. And he was a pro coach. I think it was with Rule in Carolina. So if that's true, the learning curve with him isn't as great as we saw with Theo Johnson, for instance, what you were talking about earlier. So he's a guy that could quickly, and some, I think, overly optimistic are saying he could push Theo Johnson a little bit. We'll see about that. But to get him in the 7th round, I think was a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't dare jump into the Theo Johnson category just for a lot of reasons. I mean, the Giants drafted Johnson. They have a lot invested in him. They took him 3 rounds higher than they took Fidone the year before, and he was already playing. He already kind of moved his way into really being the starting tight end before his injury. So I would kind of like, no. But I do think this guy has legit ability to make it as the second guy on the team per se. If you want to, the question was in Master Mariner said, why are we talking about pass receiving tight ends and blocking tight ends? Why can't they do both? In today's league, there's very few that do both well. You tend to now see more specific players for specific packages. I think Fidone would be the guy if they want to bring another guy in to help threaten. His height alone makes him a red zone target, and you put both he and Johnson on the field, you've got 2 very tall, athletic tight ends in the red zone, which makes it somebody who likes to throw the ball up a little bit, throw some jump balls kind of thing. These are the kind of guys that can go get it, especially in the red zone. So I think he's playing for to make the team for sure, but I don't think he's any kind of a threat to Johnson minus injury, minus Johnson just not being healthy when we get to camp. But I do think he's a legit. If he shows everything that his talent says it can be, and the knee can handle it, he's a threat to make the team for sure and have a role.
Right, and he will, like you mentioned, he will have the ability to stretch the field. He can get down the field. We'll have to see how much he can cut and do those things. There are conflicting things. Like the tight ends coach for Nebraska was saying, "Oh, he's perfectly able to cut and has the agility to be a factor in the passing game, just not vertically." We'll have to see if that's the case. So we'll see it. But he can run down the field. He can run after the catch. The good news is he's tested very well athletically. And to address this question, it's never been the case in the NFL as long as I've been watching, and I've been watching since the early 80s, late 70s, that it's very unusual to have a tight end that can do both very well. Now, there were some exceptions to the rule. The best I've ever saw was Mark Bavaro. And that's not just me talking as a Giants fan. I still haven't seen a tight end that can block as well. Mark Bavaro could block defensive ends by himself.
Yes.
And he was a 1,000-yard receiver on a team that devoid of any other really passing weapons. Mark was really, if you hadn't seen Mark Bavaro play, he if he hadn't gotten hurt, he'd easily been a Hall of Fame player. Howard Cross, for instance, who followed, he was pretty much a blocking tight end. Howard really wasn't a pass catcher. And if it's even gotten worse today, if you look and scout the college tight ends now, they're almost all these undersized receiving guys now. It's very difficult to find tight ends coming out of college right now that can block. And they almost are all these undersized, almost like H-back, strictly H-back or move tight ends that just the best you can hope is that they'll get in the way. That's just the way the college game has evolved, because I think that people are going to more spread offenses. So it's even harder to find people that can do that. So the thing about Fidone is you see people say he's not that good a blocker, but then I've seen clips where that's not the case, and he gives a really good effort. So maybe with tight ends, effort is more than half the battle. You got to have the want to block. And of course, you have to have the ability too. But Thomas has got the want to. There was a play, and they highlighted it the other day, where he blocked the defensive tackle inside. He was put in motion, and he blocked the defensive tackle. So he can block. Whether he can make a living like that, we'll see. If he can, then he really is going to cement himself as the number 2 tight end on this team. So we'll see about that. The last guy, before we get to some of these questions, and the real afterthought right here by a lot of is Jermaine Terry, who is one of the UDFAs, and it's kind of a let me bring that up again. It's kind of hard to find any information on him in college. So he was at, I think it was California. I may be wrong about that. He was at another school before he transferred. And he too, I think in 2021, he was rated by ESPN as the number 1 high school tight end coming out of high school. And his career just didn't go the way expected. But he is a really good athlete. Again, one of these move tight end guys, not a guy that, again, you really want as an inline blocker. He wasn't thrown to a lot, but he supposedly has the athletic ability, and he has the ability to catch the football. And the Giants obviously were high enough on him to bring him out, sign him in as an undrafted free agent. And he showed enough in the OTAs for them the rookie minicamp for them to keep him on. Remember, they had a bunch of tryout players, and they actually ended up cutting 2 of their UDFAs. And I was curious to see if Jermaine was going to be one of the guys that would survive the minicamp, and he did. So obviously his best shot is going to be practice squad to make it. But he's one of the guys, I don't expect him to do much, but I'm very curious about him because of the ranking coming out of high school. He has the talent. It's just, for whatever reason, it didn't come together for him in college. So I think it's a good gamble. We'll have to see. But he's a lot like Fidone in the sense that he was a highly recruited guy, athletic guy. He's another guy with a big wingspan. We'll just have to see what's there.
Well, the bulk of his production is his last year. So at California, he had 8 total receptions for 52 yards.
Yeah.
Oregon State, 6 for 52. Last year, 23 for 375 and a touchdown.
Right.
The one thing that he brings to the table is he's 270 pounds. So he's got legit weight. Right. He's not just a tall, and he's muscular, 6'5", 245. He's 6'4", 270. So this is a guy that I think if he comes in and shows he can block, then he gets a quicker path to the practice squad if he's a blocker. Because then you've got somebody.
I don't think he's that big though. Is he 270? I didn't think he was that big. He's listed as 270.
He's listed as 270
on who's?
It's basically the college version of
okay. I think the Giants have him listed at a lower weight, but I have to check that. Let me see what they've got him listed. I don't think he's that big. Doesn't mean he can't get that big. The Giants listed him as 245, so they didn't have him that big.
If that's the case, and I do apologize, that the one place is showing him. I'm still seeing.
Yeah, there's always a big difference with the college weights and when they have him with the pro. So we'll see. He doesn't look that big to me. He doesn't look like a 270 guy. But
He's got a block. He's got a block because it's that's the only way you're going to make team. I mean even make the practice squad. If he can't block, they don't really, because somebody else is also going to get cut that probably could make the practice squad. So you're going to have to show you can block.
I think his role, if he makes it, is going to actually be contrary to that, though. I think it's going to be a receiving type. I don't think blocking is his strength. Again, he's more of a move blocker than an inline blocker. So I think if he's going to have to really show that he's going to be able to be a pass catcher that they can develop. So we'll see. Again, we're probably spending too much time on him right now. I think it's a good gamble. I think again, he's got the talent. It's whether or not they can coach him up enough to make the practice squad, and then a year in the weight room, year of pro coaching, and see. Because remember, some of these guys aren't going to be here the following year,
right?
Because Manhertz is probably, one way or the other, Manhertz is probably, this is his last contract here. He's another 1-year deal. We don't know what Bellinger's future is going to lie. Even if Bellinger makes the team, he's going to be a free agent. And I would be a betting man on that he's probably not going to stick here. He'd want to test the free agent market, even if he's makes the team. So you want to get some guys on the practice squad to fill in roster spots before next year's draft. So we'll see with him. And remember, the practice squads are huge now, so they can stick a tight end on there if they want to. But you made a good point too. Some of these tight ends could end up on, even like a Dulcich could end up on the practice squad. We'll have to see. So now there were some good questions here. This is the way the game, Duncan. The game's kind of changed a little bit. The fullback's really been eliminated from the game for the most part. It's not that every now and then you'll see a team have one, but they've kind of gone extinct, don't you think, John? The fullbacks?
Yeah, it's for most teams. There's very few that actually use them. The Giants are going to be. We talked about this with the running back preview. They're not going to carry many. We're probably looking at 3 running backs that they're going to carry on the team. One of the tight ends is going to play that fullback kind of role, the
like a move. So
H-back, yeah.
So the H-back, and for those who don't know, the H-back is kind of like a move tight end. So sometimes they'll refer to an F tight end versus the Y tight end, who's the inline blocker. So when you think of these guys, some of them are guys that you can block in line, which means they put their hand in the dirt and they can block. Other guys are guys that you really don't really want to do that. You want them to be moving around and blocking on the move. So, for example, of the guys that we talked, Manhertz can put his hand in the dirt. Theo Johnson can probably put his hand in the dirt. Dulcich is probably a guy you don't want to do that with. Terry might not either. So the fullback doesn't mean that you don't have a guy like a fullback. It's just the traditional fullback has sort of been disappearing. The Greg Camellas and the Charles Ways are sort of extinct now, I think.
Oh, I totally agree. I totally agree. Other positions will also play a role. You talked about, are we going to go 3 or 4? In my opinion, last year I thought it was going to be 3. It ended up being 4. I think that's going to be 4 again this year. I think Dayball just likes having tight ends.
Yeah, I do too.
And he that any way you want to.
Yeah, and he used to coach the position. Remember, in New England, and he like you said, I think he likes them. Likes having them on the field, and that's one of the reasons why I think they'll go 4. But Andrew makes a good point here too. They're competing against wide receivers. I would say they're competing against other running backs. I'm leaning towards 4, but again, you have to see the 4th player deserve making the roster at the same time. Is the 4th tight end going to be more important to the team than the 4th running back? My guess is yes, but we'll have to see. Because I'm a little more optimistic on guys like Greg Dulcich than than John is. We'll just have to see. But Andrew, that's a really good point. And special teams comes into play there
Right.
too.
That's a big factor.
So we'll have to see there. Paul, and that's a good point. So hopefully we don't have that problem as much as we have in the past. If our tackles can stay healthy, they don't have to do that with Illuminor and Andrew Thomas. They just have to hope those guys can stay healthy. The depth is a little bit better this year. And when we talk about it, what's interesting is on the offensive line is Marcus Bowe is starting off at tackle. And of course they signed in free agency a couple of swing tackles, so we'll have to see that. Andrew brings up cap implication here, and this is something that you talked about, John, the Bellinger's cap figure. So that's not insignificant. 3.6 million. That's higher than I thought it was going to be. And that's what because you've been bringing that up for a while, and I'm thinking, how much could he possibly be making? But you're right, that's not insignificant. So,
so if you were to assume Theo's on the team, you assume Manhurts is on the team. That's 2. So now you're talking who's the third tight end. If Fidone shows anything, if he really showed, like the Giants drafted him for a reason. They're not just like, we'll just get a guy in the 7th round. We don't really care. We're just going to cut the guy. You think he has an opportunity to make the team. If he makes the team, he's 3. The 4th guy is going to be made up of somebody of Dolchich, Bellinger, and now cost comes into play. So then Bellinger would be out. Dolchich, depending on, he probably is in at that point. It really does come down to like, what do the Giants want to do with Bellinger is going to decide really somebody else on the team or not on the team. It's just whether they want to carry that salary. If talent is almost equal,
right,
then the salary is going to go. Yeah.
And it's going to be a fun group to watch because I think, let me back up for a second. I think in most drafts, your 7th round draft pick, there's no guarantee for a 7th round draft pick to ever make a roster. But I don't think Fidone is a typical 7th round draft pick. I think he lasted to the 7th round because of the ACLs. If he wasn't for the ACLs, I think he gets drafted much higher than this. Therefore, I agree with John. I think there's more likely if he shows anything, he makes the team. Now, if he struggles and they think they can get him on the practice squad and no other team's going to grab him, then obviously that's a route there. But if he shows anything in camp, you're leaning towards keeping Fidone on the roster as your 3rd tight end. And the question then becomes, do you keep a 4th tight end at that point? That's how I'm approaching this right now. I also, like I said, I see Dulcich as having a someone that you can't ignore on this just because of talent. Would it shock me if he's cut? No, but I also would not shock me if he ends up being the number 2 guy in the short term on this team because the talent was there. Again, he was the higher regarded player in the Bellinger draft for a reason, and he has flashed enough to show you that he can be that kind of play. But as John has pointed out, it's been a couple of years like Bellinger before he's really done anything. So we'll have to see. And that's why that helps Fidone. Who's your backup pass catcher on this team right now? Like if say Theo Johnson pulls a hamstring and he's out. So last year they put Bellinger back in that role. So if let's say we're in week 7 and Theo pulls a hamstring, Manhurts isn't your pass catcher. And again, now we're talking May 26th. We haven't even hit OTAs, which start tomorrow. So we don't even know. So we might hear tomorrow, they'll say, oh my God, Thomas Fidone is lights out in OTAs. But who do you think would be your pass catcher right now, your backup pass catcher?
I mean, right now, legitimately, you would still have to say Bellinger based on the experience, based on what he's actually done in the league. Because Fidone, you just don't know. I mean, you can't say for sure that's the guy. Everything is based on projecting what you hope he can do. Bellinger, you're projecting what he's done in the past and what you think he could still do. So there is at least some proven track record, even if it has declined the last couple of years. It'd have to be currently Bellinger, I would think. But your point is now I can see where you're going. Dulcich is the guy that has the
might be
most
better pass
legitimate
catcher.
receiver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I actually, if we had to play a game tomorrow, I would think Dulcich is the better pass catcher than Theo Johnson between the two. I mean, not Theo Johnson. Bellinger. Between Bellinger and Dulcich, I think Dulcich would be the better pass catcher. But that's Steve. That's actually a good question. So you could see John and I are the gears are turning there.
Yeah, it's kind of like well, and
now obviously the guy that they would like to become that guy is Fidone. But again, John and I tend to operate from the perspective that rookie is a rookie, and you've got to be a little bit conservative in terms of predicting what their potential is during the rookie year. Too, we have to see what we have in Fidone. I will say that based on the comments coming out of the rookie minicamp, there's no reason to be pessimistic about Fidone so far. So far, the comment that again from Matt Sytak from Giants.com was like, he was like, wow, he's a much better receiver than I thought. And that's the same kind of thing that you heard out of the Senior Bowl too, where the Giants had a coach coaching directly. It was Angela Baker, I think, who's no longer a coach with the Giants, but she was coaching the tight ends at the Senior Bowl. I think she was coaching Fidone specifically at the Senior Bowl. So they got their hands on him in those practices in the game. So,
for a free shout out to anybody in the chat on our next show, give me the 3 tight ends from the '90 Super Bowl team. Not you, Eric. I know
you tried to stump me the other day on this, and you didn't stump me.
No. So anybody who knows, if you know it, you'll get a free. I'll just shout you out on Wednesday.
They're gonna search Wikipedia real quick.
Probably, but I'm only gonna give. You're only gonna get like a minute to figure it out.
Let's see. Wait a minute. I see. Optimus is easily trying to answer this. So, did we hit all the questions? I'm just trying
there
to see.
We go. Well done. I knew.
I'm trying to see. Did we hit all the questions? If we didn't hit your question, please retype it, guys. I'm trying to look through your questions right now to see if we missed anything here. So, Bob Morosco.
Yes. That dude was essentially, they had him as another offensive lineman.
Yes. He was a good blocker.
But Mowat was not on the 90 team. He did not catch he was not part of the
What was Mowat's last year with the Giants?
Was it 80? Was it 89? Was it 89? Either that or he was hurt, but it was Bavaro Cross Morosco were the tight ends. Morosco caught a touchdown pass against the Bears in a playoff game.
Yeah, and that's such a tight end name too, Bob Morosco.
Yes. And now we've got an offensive lineman, Marcus Embo.
Yeah.
So there you go. All right. Not that I'm just again looking for correlations, but that was good. So again, we're trying to hit the questions, all this stuff on Wednesday night. I'm just being honest. I'm not going to be able to hit the individual questions. Super chat questions will get hit on that night. We're going to be busy with the other guys. We got 4 big topics to go through, and we're going to be drinking beers, and it's going to be really hard for me to keep up on a lot of those.
We might be able to get the questions in, though. We'll see. Let's not become too whorish here.
It's not a matter of whorish. It's just a matter of I'm trying to prioritize. It takes a lot to keep these things going. We're working our butts off.
So let's finish up with this. We'll keep this short. I think we'll keep it short.
It's an hour.
What is your overall sense of this group? Obviously, as on paper, you look at this group and you say, these guys haven't done anything. And you and I tend to be more optimistic about stuff. Are we being overly optimistic? Are we being not optimistic enough? Are we spot on? My take personally on this is I'm really high on Theo. I think getting Fidone in the 7th round was a steal. Hopefully the knees hold up. And I think the rest of these guys are fighting for roster spots. That's my take right now. I think Theo Johnson and Fidone are probably more likely to make the team, probably Manhertz too. And I could see it being Dulcich versus Bellinger at this point. But Manhertz has got to show he can. show he can continue to beat block. And you, like you said, you weren't really crazy about his blocking last year. But I think I'm higher on this group because I'm high on Theo Johnson. And people who are not high on Theo Johnson probably have a different take.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good take. My reluctance to be too optimistic is this, and you just kind of said it without intentionally saying it.
Right.
Manhurts is the only one of this group that really doesn't have an injury history. Bellinger has an injury history to a degree, and his play has declined since injury. Dulcich has a long history of nagging little injuries, but they've held his growth back.
Right. Yes.
Fidone is a guy who's been injured in college multiple times.
Seriously.
So while he's played since then, it can't not be in the back of your mind. And Theo Johnson's coming off of Liz Frank. So I want to be more optimistic. I think I'm more conservative about it just because I got to see how some of these guys make it through camp and that everybody's healthy. Assuming health is not a factor, and we all know with the Giants that that's not been the case for years, but assuming health is not a factor, then I feel pretty good that we have a good mix of guys who can do individual things very well and a mix of youth and veteran pieces. It's just how it shakes out. But that injury piece keeps me just somewhat a little more conservative with my enthusiasm.
One of my big questions moving forward is this, and we won't know the answer to this until the season is over. How big a need is tight end on this team in next year's draft? So we don't know the answer to that because it might not be a need at all, because if Theo has a really good year and Thomas Fidone looks like he's a steal, a legitimate steal, then it may not be that big a need. But if those guys don't play up to expectations, then I could see tight end being a pretty significant need in the draft next year. We just have to – that's where we're at. This is probably – is it fair to say this might be next to – maybe even more so than the offensive line. Would you say that this is the most unsettled group because we're basing it mainly on potential? So on the offensive line, you have Andrew Thomas still. You have Runyon. You have Van Roten. I mean, again, you got guys that have a baseline of experience. This is a group that we're largely trying to. I think we're projecting this more than any. Let me ask you: is this the biggest projection area of the team that we're?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I wouldn't use the word unsettled the way you said in the beginning, because I think the top two are set. I think Johnson and Manhurts are on the team. I think they're on. The only way Manhurts is not on the team is Bellinger lights it up and one of the other rookies lights it up and the other guys don't. And then they're like, we'll Bellinger because he's just too good. I don't see that as being a problem. But I do think Manhurts and Johnson are there. And then we're projecting the rest. Offensive line, when you said that, I'm thinking we keep trying to project somebody else in at right guard. But in reality, the Giants brought back 5 guys that they can start. Right. They brought back Van Roten because they can just start him. They know that they can play those guys together. So it's not really unsettled. We just want something better.
Right. And that's why, and I guess it's how I define unsettled. The thing is again, Theo Johnson, I have a vision of what I think Theo Johnson's going to be, but it's a projection in my head, which maybe end up being completely incorrect. I mean, Theo Johnson may not be the player that I think he is. We'll have to find out. I think he's going to be a good player. But if he isn't a good player, this group looks way different to me. And I'm a little bit reticent because of this, is because I was very, very high on one of the biggest misses I had ever on the history of the site was how high I was on the tight end room when Darren Waller and Bellinger were there going into 2023. I thought because of what Bellinger did in 2022, that he, as a number 2 tight end, he would be very good as a number 2 tight end. And I thought, because of what Darren Waller did in training camp, remember Darren Waller's training camp? No one could cover him.
Oh yeah. And then he comes
so
up.
We all were like, it was daily. It was like no one can cover Darren Waller, and we were all, oh my God, this is great. And he wasn't getting hurt. And then we learned, what was it, like days before the season start? He's
Well,
got a
didn't
hamstring issue.
didn't he look good against in the first series against Carolina, the same series that Jones looked good and everybody got pulled out after one series,
Maybe.
and then
I don't know.
the injury developed in practice leading up to week 1, and you're like,
Yeah, I
what
know the
the
injury
hell?
came out of nowhere, and it was like as soon as it happened, it was like, oh my god. And then it,
So Optimus confirmed what I said. Mowat did leave after the '89 season. He went to the Patriots where he had the issue with Lisa Olson. That's where the missile
you love bringing that up.
the missile was born. Hey, I didn't bring it up. Lisa
Yeah,
Olson did.
Lisa
Ba-dum-bum.
Olsen.
Anyway, that being said, I think really the funny thing too for the tight end spot is somebody else mentioned it about competing with other positions and I'm not fully on board with that because I think the Giants want 4 guys at tight end. They proved it last year. And how did they prove it last year? We went and signed his name gets said differently each time, but I believe it's Jakob Johnson was the fullback that we signed. And you're thinking the Giants wanted a traditional fullback. That's why they went and got him. They bring him in, and then they cut him right before the start of the season, and we go with 4
Right.
tight ends. It's like,
Right.
why'd you even bother bringing them in? So I think the Giants want 4 tight ends. The receiving number is one that's going to vary slightly. I think the running backs are going to be 3, and we're going to stash somebody on the practice squad. That's kind of seems to be the MO of what we do. So what I'm curious about is how the quarterbacks develop with the tight ends.
Right.
Wilson, you and I both, I think, I don't want to necessarily speak for you, but we question a little bit about Wilson with the tight ends. We know what he does with receivers outside,
Right.
but it's
And he
the
throws to
closer
the backs, and he'll throw to the backs.
it's the closer game across the middle that I'm not so sure about. Jameis Winston, on the other hand, he was lighting it up with the tight end from, and it's escaping my mind at the moment, from Cleveland. Those guys were
What was his name?
the guy out of Miami.
Optimus is going to tell us who it is.
Yeah,
I know who you're talking. I know who you're talking about. But that's what I liked about. But that's what I liked about the highlights with Dulcich, though. Like I said, he was Russell Wilson was throwing the Dulcich in those highlights. So maybe they got a rapport together. We'll see.
Well,
Like
and
said,
so what I'm thinking though is like you're going to get a different look depending on who the quarterback is.
Yeah.
So my real question is, where does Jackson Dart fall in between those 2 guys? Is he
we have to find out. Is
he a tight end guy? Does he use the tight end? I'm hoping that we can get some answers down the road before we even see him play. We'll see. But I'm curious to see because his development, some of these younger guys who are going to be getting a lot of time with him in the second or third team, it's probably third team reps, are really going to get to a feel for him, and they could find their way on the roster just by developing with him.
So our third team tight end probably right now is still
Njoku. Thank you.
Bellinger and Dulcich, right? The third team tight ends, because you're going to get Theo Johnson's going to be with the first team. Manhurts with the 12 personnel will be on the first team. Fidone II. Yeah, you're right. So I would think that Dart's going to get a lot of time with Fidone, Dulcich, maybe Bellinger.
I would think
We'll
so.
see.
I would think. And then the other thing is, and when we get to quarterbacks, we can discuss this a lot further. I mean, how much do the Giants play Dart in the preseason? How much of training camp is really designed around, we got veterans that we expect will know their job. They're new, but we're going to give them time. But we're going to spend a lot of time getting Dart ready if we want him to play. So that's really going to be an interesting take.
Yeah, there's so much I want to say right now, but I want to save it for a quarterback preview. I would think the guy that might not get that many reps is actually Jameis Winston. Because
I think you might be right.
Because like you said, you got to get Dart ready. You got to get Dart ready, not just ready for the season. You got to get Dart practice
first career. Yeah.
Once the regular season starts, he's not going to get that many reps. So he's got to get his reps in training camp and in the preseason. And remember, the preseason's 3 games now. So I think Jameis is the guy that might be. That's going to be interesting how they handle the quarterback position in training camp, because I don't think they want Dart to be the typical third string quarterback. They don't want him to be DeVito last year in training camp, being the third guy that comes in. Because the way it works is first team guys come out, they get a bunch of reps. Second team comes out and get a bunch of reps. Third team comes out and they get like just a few plays at the end of practice or at the end of the sequence that they're doing. So they'll have like 7-on-7, 11-on-11, 11s. And the first and second teams get the bulk of the snaps. And then towards the end, the third team guys do. And they don't ever seem to get the same number of snaps. That's my take. And maybe that's changed in recent years, but in the training camps that I've been to, the third team guys are lucky to get as many snaps as the other two units. And I don't think you want Dart in that situation. I want Dart, you want him to get as many snaps as possible.
Oh,
But we're getting off pocket. I guess we're getting off.
I agree. So it got a good question, which is interesting. Thoughts on Kafka Dayball playing two tight ends like Belichick did with Gronk and Hernandez. So like a Johnson, Fidone, or whoever. It depends, because I think that when we go two tight ends on the field at the same time, we tend to have one is more the blocker, usually Manhurts, and then somebody else is more of the two-way tight end. To have two tight ends that can be, I don't want to say two-way, because we really only have one strictly two-way player, and that's Johnson. Everybody else is we don't know if they can block other than Manhurts, but Manhurts isn't a receiver. So it's a different thing. The Patriots basically were running, if you take Gronkowski and Hernandez, they were doing more of a club and shoot.
But I would love to see
nothing.
They're doing. Sorry. I was thinking of the question.
It's all good. I was trying to think. I was going to stab and it didn't work.
We don't have our old thing with the symbols in it. I can't give you the.
Yeah, I know. But I do like this much better than what we had.
I would love to see them run two vertical routes with Fidone and Theo Johnson just down the seam, both seams, because I think both those guys can stretch the field vertically. So what John is saying is correct in the sense that a lot of this is we're projecting in this position so much. What kind of blocker is Thomas Fidone? So his college coaches liked him as a blocker, but we're going to have to see, can he block at this level? If he can block at this level, and Theo Johnson keeps improving his blocking, then you can see more two tight end sets with those two in there. And then at that point, Chris Manhurts' job might be more at risk. So I'm going to go on record right now. To me, this is the hardest position on all offense or defense to project right now, because there are too many what ifs, too many unknowns, too many. It's a very young group other than Manhurts. We're still, I mean, even Bellinger's still relatively green. He's still on his first contract. So I just think this is a very hard group to I'm optimistic because I'm optimistic about Theo. I'm very hopeful Thomas Fidone, but that hope in being optimistic isn't based in reality. It's a gut feeling with me right now.
So
I'm trying to be happy.
Yeah, no, I think it's fine. I think we covered the position. You've got the players that, no, I guess pun intended. We've got all the folks that are going to be involved in the decision, unless someone else gets cut somewhere else during camp and the Giants decide, hey, we're going to bring this guy in. I think we're going to go with what we got, and It's just who of this group is going to be there, and then it's a matter of, is it 3 or 4? Based on history with Dayball, it appears that it's 4, but again, roster juggling happens like crazy, and we've seen before where they've dropped a bunch of guys that we thought were going to make the team and threw them on the practice squad just so that they could pull them up later. So we'll see how they handle it. But right now, I would think you lean towards 4. 2 are pretty much locked in. I would say Johnson and Manhurts, and then it's the other 2 that is really at play. But also, injury would change this in a heartbeat. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, and the last thing I will say is, if the Giants are more concerned about this position, that doesn't mean they're right, but if the Giants were more concerned about this position, I think they would have drafted a tight end higher than they did, because it was a fairly strong tight end group in the draft this year. And they did not pursue anyone really in free agency. It wasn't a very good free agent tight end group. You and I talked about in the tight end preview. But I think they feel pretty good about this group, is my guess. Not great, not like awesome, but I think they feel like it's a pretty decent group. And I'm still encouraged by the fact that when the Giants employees talk about Theo Johnson, they say, "Oh, they really like him," that kind of thing. So that tells me behind the scenes they're hearing good things about Theo Johnson from the coaching staff. That's my take.
So with that, I agree. We'll wrap up the tight end preview. I will post this. I'll post this onto Spotify and all those good things a little bit later. Keep in mind, Wednesday night, we do have the Pour for Wednesday. So we will be pouring out the subjects and the beers on Wednesday with the New York Rush guys. They're going to be joining us. We're going to do 4 topics. We're going to go around. We're going to do about 20 minutes per topic. We will try to take questions as we could do it, but we're going to have a lot of fun with that. And then who knows? We've got some other things. And like I said, the next season review will be the 2000 season. We just have to lock down the date, and really that's just locking in. Offensive lineman Glenn Parker is going to be joining us, so that'll be fun to have somebody who was on that 2000 team, especially a team that really, they were not supposed to be Super Bowl contenders. They weren't supposed to be very good, to be quite honest. There was a lot of questions, and the Giants went with the all-man offensive line. If you don't remember, Lomas Brown and Glenn Parker playing side by side. We had a very old left side of the offensive line, but that settled everything down. Pettigrew was moved over to right tackle. So this was a big deal. It'll be a lot of fun to have somebody on the inside of that. And then we've got some other things coming too that as soon as we lock them in, I'm really going to be excited about sharing that once we have it finalized. So
yep, we're going to be moving our chips to the center of the table.
That's right. We're all in, baby. all in. So Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Join us live, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll catch you again real soon.